Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 372 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Con Whiteley. And today's episode is on how to cope with unemployment. And it is Friday the 13th of March 2026 as I record this. So today's podcast episode is really useful, insightful, and if you are unemployed, which is very common at the moment, as I talk about in the content part of today's episode, and this is a problem that's only getting worse because of the economic situation. If you don't manage your mental health productively or proactively, then unemployment can take a real toll on your mental health. And then this can lead to a very vicious cycle because if you're unemployed, then this can harm your mental health. But then because you've got negative mental health though, and because you've lost a motivation, you've got lower mood, and if you have depressive and anxious symptoms, then this can further negatively impact your ability to find a job, and then this makes your symptoms worse, etc. So it really can become a vicious cycle. But by the end of today's engaging, fascinating podcast episode, you will learn how to cope with unemployment. So this is about practicing self-care, reaching out to social support, doing something every day, and we draw a lot on behavioural activation amongst a whole host of our mental health tips and tricks. So this is a really useful and insightful podcast episode that I've definitely found helpful, and I didn't know that my mental health is so much better off this time round compared to last year, a year though, between when I finished my masters and when I started my teaching assistant job though, so my mental health is a lot better off, and it's largely because of these tips and tricks that I'm going to share with you in today's podcast episode. So you got that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the psychology news section. We're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and the first one is: new students have a whole lot of misconceptions about psychology. Misconceptions and myths about psychology abound, but students taking an introductory psychology course wouldn't fall for them, right? If you're someone who's taken such a course, do you think that children learn best when taught in ways that match their own particular learning style? Do you think hypnosis is actually useful for retrieving memories of forgotten events? And do you think that to be effective, psychotherapy requires that people explore childhood problems that explore their current disorder? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're wrong. You're also very far from alone. According to a recent study in the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Psychology, 933 students who had completed an introductory course endorsed an average of just over half of 40 psychology misconceptions. So, as someone who worked a lot of psychology open days for my university, there are so many myths and misconceptions, and here's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, Myths About Clinical Psychology, just to help people understand the truth about clinical psychology. But also, like some of the other myths that I've heard, is people do not understand the difference between forensic psychology and forensic science. Because when we had questions about our forensic psychology course, people would always ask us, "Oh, or what is it like testing blood samples? what's it like doing crime scene analysis and evidence collection after a murder, etc. And we were just like, wow, like we really had to word our answers so carefully. Because at first we were so confused by them, but then afterwards we were like, right, this isn't one person being a bit silly. This is an entire misconception that a lot of people have. So normally I would just hand it over to the forensic psychology lecturers. So I was like, this is your area. You can deal with this. I've already dealt with 10 of these today. You can do some. So that was one of my attitudes. But it was also just a bit of fun. It was just really insightful. Like, if you want to know about myths and misconceptions about psychology, work a psychology open day at a university. You meet so many lovely people, and oh, those people are amazing. You really have some lovely conversations. But equally, you see what the current myth is about psychology, and some of them are just head shaking, and some of them you talk about with your fellow ambassadors later, and you're like, I do not, even now after talking to you lot, I do not understand how people can arrive at this conclusion about psychology. So I think if we apply this to everyday life, I think that we've just got to become aware of these myths and misconceptions. We've got to keep educating others about what psychology actually is. And if we encounter one of these myths, we've got to respectfully, compassionately, and without judgment, which again are clinical psychology skills, just challenge them. Because these people are not silly. They've just heard something, they've treated it as fact, when it actually isn't. And we've all done that to various extents over the years. This is a problem that we've got to deal with, and we've got to make people more educated about our profession, but equally we've got to do it with compassion. So the second one is, can NHS branded face masks save lives? Encouraging people to follow health guidance is important to public health, but not everyone responds to requests to follow said guidance. In a paper in Psychology and Health, researchers at the University of Westminster and colleagues studied whether a new messaging approach pairing reminders of mortality with exposure to a presenter wearing an NHS branded face mask can shape how people respond to COVID 19 health advice. The team tested this approach in both vaccinated and unvaccinated adults, finding that for some unvaccinated participants, seeing a poster with the Chief Medical Officer for England, Professor Chris Whitty, wearing an NHS branded face mask versus no face mask or plain mask, after being reminded of their mortal nature, increased intention to follow COVID 19 guidance, such as getting a COVID 19 vaccine. Okay, so I think this study is first of all a great reminder about how slow academic publishing is, because even though this study could easily be 3, 4, or even 5, or to be honest, 6 years at this point, which I think is mad. Like, it's been 6 years since the first COVID 19 lockdown in the UK. In all fairness, it might be close to exactly 6 years. So you might first of all just dismiss this because, oh, this is COVID 19, it's not a problem anymore, we can't learn anything from it. We need to take a step back. I would also say, let's acknowledge that we might be feeling uncomfortable talking about COVID because all of us would much more prefer just to forget about COVID, pretend it didn't happen. But the core principles of this study still remain. So the core part of this article is that if the public sees someone who are giving them health advice who is recognizable as a healthcare professional and they're using NHS branded stuff, which is the UK's National Health Service, then it does increase their trust. And when we can see that that person themselves is a trusted or authority figure, and even if you didn't know who Professor Chris Albedo was, though, and because you can see that he's wearing NHS stuff, you can infer that he knows what he's talking about because he's a healthcare professional. So but that's important too, but one extent. Another aspect is that compared to no mask or plain mask, so if someone is giving you COVID-19 health guidance and they're not wearing a mask, which means that they're not following health guidance themselves, then why would you listen to that person? So that's something that we can think about. So in terms of future pandemics and future public health messaging, it's important that the person delivering the message is a trusted or authority figure. They themselves are following the health guidelines, and you can see that they come from a good, reliable source like the NHS. So that's just something to think about. So the last one is participant bots often aren't bots at all. Any researcher who collects data online will be well aware of the bot crisis. The idea that automated computer programs are completed surveys intended for people, leading to banned data, and ruining what should be a relatively easy method of collecting participants from a large number of people is a problem that many regard as undermining the potential of online research. But according to a recent paper in Perspectives on Psychological Science, the bot crisis is actually nothing of the sort. As a researcher at Cloud Research and colleagues titled their paper, "The bots ruining social science are not bots at all." In fact, they include the sources of bad data, apparently submitted by people in the United States, a basic stipulation of participation for many studies run by US-based teams, often seem to be not bots, fraudsters from other countries who are filling in surveys for the financial rewards. This conclusion is based on the results of studies that the team conducted over a 5-year period. Okay, so there are a few things that we can reflect on here. I would say, first of all, I love online research because it is just so easy. I would just say that my 4 mental health studies were done online because I could just set them up and just forget them until the deadline. So as a researcher, they are so ideal. And because I was very targeted in terms of who I contacted and who I made my research available to, I didn't have this bot problem. But if it was sort of like open access, then I definitely understand that bots do tend to ruin data. But equally, if you use a VPN, so a virtual private network, that can make you look like you're in a particular country, when in reality, you're not. So that's something that we can look at for the future. So if you're running an online research study, do not allow people to use VPNs because then this means that hopefully you'll be able to only get people from the country of your desired research sample. And financial rewards, when you offer studies for financial rewards, this is always going to happen. This is a problem that we are just going to have to deal with and figure out. But equally, I think this is another reason why it's important to do quite low financial rewards. One, for ethical reasons, but two, because it does discourage a lot of fraudsters from filling in these surveys. Simply because, why would you spend so much time and commit fraud for something like $5 or $10? Even though for some people, but that would be a lot of money, especially if you're in a poorer country. So, in all fairness, I don't think that actually is a way to solve it. So, there's a lot to think about. I think that this is something that we've got to continue to look at. But my main tip at the moment is simply do not allow participants to use a VPN but also try and target your research sample in terms of do not make it open access so anyone could actually use it and anyone could access it. But equally, then you've got problems with the recruitment. So there are no easy answers here. And I just want to raise that. So I hope you enjoyed the psychology news section. Let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. So this week has been really interesting and a lot of fun, mainly because I've been looking at different ways to become a qualified mental health professional. Because and this led to a lot of learning, a lot of reflecting, and it has led to a bonus podcast episode that will be coming out on Thursday. And I've just finished recording it. So it was so much fun and I flat out loved it. So, something that I want to talk about is that in the United Kingdom, if you do a psychology degree, typically you are not qualified by the end of it in anything. And we all know that clinical psychology, to be able to even get your foot in the door, you need to do years of unpaid work experience, which if you are not in the financial position to do that, like me, so I need to be earning money. I cannot do years of unpaid work experience for nothing. I need to be earning money because I've got bills to pay. I've got other things that I need money for. In addition, during my undergraduate degree and my master's degree, I was too busy dealing with my own mental health to be able to do long term volunteering. And during my master's, I was struggling enough to pay for my master's and my bills and my rent anyway. So I didn't really have the money for it in the slightest. So I did need to be working. I did not have time to do unpaid volunteering. So doing the psychology route, which is like 1,000,000 to 1, and clinical psychology is next to impossible to deal with, I've been looking at other ways to become a mental health practitioner. So in the UK, the main ways to do that are to become a nurse, so you can become a mental health nurse, or what you do is you can become a qualified social worker. So those are some options that I'm experiencing and that I'm looking at. I've applied for some different jobs, but of course, the UK economy is not good at the moment, and basically there are so few jobs out there. And to be honest, this is the wrong time of year to be looking for psychology or basically any sort of jobs that require you to have some sort of academic placement or academic courses. I have been really enjoying looking in at this problem solving, thinking right, instead of feeling sorry for myself and being angry that I can't get a mental health job in psychology, I'm problem solving. I'm reflecting, I'm applying for other jobs, and I'm using a lot of the tips that I talk about in today's podcast episode. For example, expanding my options, practicing self care, planning fun activities every day, and so many more brilliant insights. And I'm having a lot of fun, and I am actually really happy that my mental health is so much better than it was when I was last unemployed after my master's, just because it was difficult. And I felt the job application process was so depressing, so annoying though. But now I've got a much better attitude towards it, and I'm being a lot more balanced. So that's something to think about, and that's why today's podcast episode is going to be really, really useful. And I have been doing a lot of other fun stuff though. So, like last Saturday, me and my dad went to this Coldplay tribute band, which was definitely like my first sort of concert. It was okay. Loved spending time with my dad, and seeing him, and yeah, it was good. It was yeah. I'm not sure live music will ever be my thing, but I did get a bioterrorism plot idea for a mystery book a romance short story which which is nothing to do with bioterrorism, and I've got some other ideas. So my mystery writer brain was very happy about it, and my dad sort of said, I know my dad was sort of just laughed at me because he was just only you and your creative brain could make such a weird idea from us simply going to a concert together. And I was like, yep, that is exactly how my brain works. So as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave comments at the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi Wiley or leave a comment on the Facebook post or LinkedIn post. And always feel free to send pictures of where you're listening from, because I always love to see where all of you are all over the world. And the reason why I like to hear from you is because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And today's episode has been sponsored by Suicide Psychology. Now, at first, I fully admit that this sounds like a really weird sponsor for today's episode, but one of the biggest factors in determining suicide risk, and one of the massive findings that we have from suicide research is unemployment, because a massive number of people who die by suicide are unemployed. Therefore, unemployment does play a massive role in suicide and mental health conditions. Therefore, by the end of this great, really engaging and easy to understand book, you'll understand what are the risk factors behind a suicide, what is the truth behind a suicide, what are the neurological, biological, cognitive, and social factors that can contribute to a suicide, and so many more great, brilliant insights that I flat out love learning about. And if you want to work in clinical psychology, I really do recommend that you have a good understanding of suicide. Therefore, there is Suicide Psychology, available from all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, local bookstore, or local library if you request it. And if you want to get the audiobook narrated by artificial intelligence, then now you can from selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Kobo, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble, and select library systems too, like Overdrive and Biblioteca. So while buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And as always, a massive thank you to my patrons. Your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. So if you want to become a patron of the show and get access to tons of great rewards, including over 100 exclusive blog posts which won't be made into podcast episodes for weeks, months, or even years, then please head on over to patreon.com/the Psychology World podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, then now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So that's enough for the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about how to cope with unemployment. It's a brilliant podcast episode. I learned a lot and I know you're going to really enjoy it. So let's dive into it. And as always, the content part of today's podcast episode is narrated using my AI voice clone from 11 Labs. So please enjoy and I will see you on the other side. Introduction to the mental health impact of unemployment. Before we dive into how to cope with unemployment, I want to set the global stage for a few moments. Also, in the interest of full disclosure, I wanted to let you know that yesterday at the time of writing, I finished my employment at a special educational needs school, and whilst I've been job hunting for 3 weeks, I am still unemployed. I want to mention this because I just want to be honest about my perspective and that I am basically one of the statistics that we're going to be talking about in today's podcast episode, as well as after the completion of my clinical psychology MSc, I was unemployed for 3 months between August and October 2025. According to the Bureau of Labour Statistics, as of February 2026, the unemployment rate in the United States of America is 4.4%, and this is a slight increase from January 2026, as well as according to US Bureau of Labour Statistics. In 2025, the youth unemployment rate was 10.8%. When it comes to the United Kingdom, according to the Office of National Statistics, the overall unemployment rate as of December 2025 was 5.2%, and we won't know the current unemployment rate until later this month because the Office of National Statistics produces these sort of figures every 3 months, as well as when it comes to youth unemployment. As of December 2025, 16.1% of all young people were unemployed in the UK. That is shocking scary, and when I first read that figure, I did feel rather hopeless, shocked, and just annoyed. I am in that 16.1%, and it isn't good that young people don't have the opportunities, skills, and experience to get a job. This isn't a political show, but it's flat out critical that there is more investment and government intervention in this area. Finally, in terms of the European Union, so across its 27 member states in October 2025, the average unemployment rate is 6%, and this is a historical low point because during the 2010s, the unemployment rate in the EU was over 10%. The source for this information came from Statista, as well as the youth unemployment rate across the European Union is 15.1%. Personally, as a young person, this is disheartening. It does make you feel a little hopeless because it makes you wonder, how are you meant to get a job when it's so common for people your age to be unemployed? As well as for me, it's even more frustrating that I have 2 degrees, I have 7 years experience working in education and more, but I still cannot find a job. Why is unemployment bad for our mental health? Anyway, in terms of clinical psychology, it's important to be aware of unemployment because unemployment can have a wide range of negative impacts on our mental health. For example, unemployment causes people a lot of uncertainty, and this can lead to anxiety as well as stress. Also, prolonged periods of unemployment can increase the risk of depression, and it can lead to social isolation. This makes any existing or other mental health difficulties more severe. Another negative mental health impact of unemployment is self-esteem, because job loss can lower our self-esteem, so this can lead us to feel less valued or important. A final negative impact is long-term unemployment can lead to chronic stress because you're worried about running out of money, never being able to find another job, amongst other factors. Therefore, as a society, and we're edging into politics here, but I don't care, I strongly believe we need to invest in opportunities for people to upskill, create more jobs in sustainable sectors, as well as we need to invest in our younger people so they can get into the workforce and start earning. Also, young people want to work, they want to contribute to society, and they want to start developing skills and learn from experiences that are going to serve them for years to come. If we don't invest in our young people, then they aren't going to find a job, get experience, and the longer you're out of work, the harder it is to find a job. It's a well-known rule of thumb amongst managers, because my family has spoken to their bosses over the years about this. All their managers confirm that whilst they aren't opposed to hiring someone who's unemployed, they prefer people who are already employed. It just goes to show one of the most annoying things about the job market. Everyone wants you to have experience, but how do you get experience without a job? In addition, I understand in clinical psychology there is the unethical expectation that aspiring psychologists are meant to do years of unpaid work experience, and in most cases, they are expected to do the same work as someone who's fully paid. Yet, if you're too busy dealing with your own mental health struggles, too busy focusing on your degree, and you're too poor to do years of unpaid work, then how are you meant to get the years of work experience just to get your foot in the door in clinical psychology? How do you cope with unemployment? Now, I want to mention numerous tips and tricks to help you cope with being unemployed. So, hopefully, you won't fall into depression, despair, and a sense of hopelessness. Cope with unemployment by understanding. Unemployment is normal. Whilst I honestly wish that I never had to write that subheading, it is the truth. Unemployment is a sad but normal part of life. Research shows that 41% of people will be unemployed at some point in their life. And if I think about my own family, that is definitely true. All of them, except my dad, has been unemployed at different times of their life. They all found another job, they're all thriving and enjoying work. Therefore, whilst you might not be happy that you're unemployed, and I'm certainly not happy about it, please know that you aren't alone. Being unemployed isn't strange, abnormal, and it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. As aspiring or qualified psychologists, we can reflect on this tip very well from two angles. Firstly, when it comes to our own profession, in the United Kingdom, there are tens of thousands of psychology graduates that finish university each year, so few of them will ever become practicing psychologists or assistant psychologists. As well as I've written before about the importance in other places of having a backup plan, because the chances of you ever working in a psychology is so remote. In addition, I need to write a clinical psychology reflection on this topic later, but I firmly believe that psychology has a qualification issue. There are so many degrees in the United Kingdom where an undergraduate comes out a fully qualified professional that is eligible for registration, and then they can start practicing. Of course, finding a job can still be impossible, but if you do a nursing degree, midwifery, podiatry, speech and language therapy, and so many other licensing degrees in the UK, you are at least qualified in that profession. A psychology degree doesn't get you qualified in anything. Therefore, I strongly believe at least some psychology courses should be restructured, made longer, and include practical work experience elements so you can at least finish your undergraduate degree or postgraduate master's with a professional qualification in something. Anyway, I'll jump off my new soapbox for a moment. Another way how aspiring and qualified psychologists can use this tip is when we're supporting unemployed clients who might be experiencing clinically significant levels of distress, depression, or anxiety because of their employment situation. We can work with them to recognize that unemployment isn't easy, it's not a happy place, but it is normal, as well as I think we can tap into some negative automatic thoughts here and possible rules to live by. This approach might help us to understand why a client could struggle to understand that this is normal, and it could help us understand what is maintaining the depression or other mental health condition. Cope with unemployment by not taking it personally. As I mentioned a moment ago, being unemployed doesn't mean you're useless, not good at anything, and it doesn't reflect your worth. So many other people are unemployed for no fault of their own. I have a lot of clinical skills. I have 2 degrees and 7 years of experience in education settings. I am kind, compassionate, and very easy to like according to my peers, but I can't find a job. Does that make me a failure or a useless person? No, it doesn't. As a result, a lot of unemployment is simply down to market conditions as well as the problems that an agency or a company might be having, and this has nothing to do with you, your skills, and your abilities. Also, for a lot of people, there is very little job security, and in the United States, there are over 7 million people out of work at any one time every single year. As an aspiring psychologist, if I was trying to use this tip with a client, I might try and do some work on their locus of evaluation or locus of control, since I would be curious to see if employment is validating for them, if they have any beliefs about them getting their self worth from their work or their employment status. If this is the case, then I would try and work with the client to restructure these beliefs so they get more of an internal source of evaluation, as this might help them cope with unemployment, as their self worth isn't tied up to whether they're employed or not. On the flip side, as an aspiring psychologist, I would add that this is an attitude I always try and adopt. For example, last year when I finished up my master's and I was going job hunting for a wide range of different mental health roles, and the rejections started to pile up, I always had the attitude of, I know that I'm good, I know I want to learn, and I want to have a role where I can learn from the professionals. Yet there are always people with more experience than me, so the jobs tend to go to them. That isn't a reflection of me, my ability, or my drive to improve. It's a reflection of the job market not giving me a chance or any space to gain the experience that other people have. That's one way to look at it. Cope with unemployment by validating yourself. Ever since I did a podcast episode before on the importance of a validation, I've been really hot on wanting to validate myself and others whenever I get a chance, because it can be a communication superpower. Therefore, as we know from the statistics I shared in the opening section, a lot of other people are unemployed, and this means that you should validate yourself and respect any feelings or emotions that you're having. Whatever you're experiencing, it's okay, it's normal, and it's understandable for what's happening to you. For example, it's okay, understandable, and normal that I'm anxious. I still have bills and rent to pay on a house I'm no longer living in because of my abusive housing situation that I escaped last year. I'm anxious about running out of money, possibly having to take money out of my business to cover my living costs, and I'm anxious about how this period of unemployment will impact my future. Furthermore, feelings of anxiety and other negative emotions can help you to take a more proactive approach where you commit to taking an action. This can help you tolerate the present situation, whilst giving a sense of taking a step forward to improve your current situation. This helps to reduce feelings of helplessness. Personally, every day this week, I'm applying for 2 jobs a day, or I'm trying to. For instance, yesterday I spent 40 minutes trying to apply for a job at the UK Home Office for a civil service position because the pensions are amazing there, and it's a job. I need a job. Yet I failed the civil service judgment exam for the second time. The first time was for the health and safety executive. So I still tried. As well as I've decided that I will no longer apply for any civil service jobs because I cannot pass that judgment exam. Yet I am still trying, pushing myself forward, and I am taking slow steps to improve my employment situation. Cope with unemployment by finding a job and looking after yourself. Building upon the last point, it's critical that you start trying to find a new job. If you don't take any proactive steps to change your employment situation, then you will feel hopeless, anxious, and your mental health will be harmed. For example, every week I check jobs in the National Health Service. I look for NHS apprenticeships, Indeed, and the various political parties and social campaigns that I'm passionate about to see if they have any jobs. I'm a little desperate. As well as every day, I check Health Jobs UK to see if any NHS trust is hiring assistant psychologists or any other mental health jobs. Yeah, it is the wrong time of year, to be honest. However, I am still being proactive. I am searching for a job and I'm trying. This doesn't make me feel more hopeless, and I haven't been as anxious or concerned about employment this week compared to last week. As a result, for aspiring and qualified psychologists, if you find yourself unemployed, and I want to mention here that it isn't uncommon for fully qualified clinical psychologists to finish the doctorate and be unemployed for a while, it's important that you do apply for jobs, you keep job hunting, and you keep being proactive so you don't start feeling hopeless and like you've wasted for your life studying for a degree that you can't get a job with. Personally, I will be honest, maybe a little too honest. Sometimes I need to catch myself, since whilst I flat out love psychology, doing my psychology degree, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Sometimes I think I should have done another degree that would allow me to become qualified in something, because all the jobs I see at the moment require you to be qualified. I am not qualified in anything because I only have 2 degrees and I am educated to master's level. Moreover, whilst you need to keep finding a job, you also need to look after yourself, practice self care, and protect your mental health. As much as you might believe you need to look all day for a new job, that will only prolong the unpleasant experience of job hunting that leads to rejection, and it's a constant reminder that you're out of work. This is why it's important that you balance your time with pleasurable activities that aren't related to job hunting or work. This might be one of the reasons why I haven't written or researched the job hunting topic on how to answer "tell me about yourself" interview questions. I don't want my entire life to become about job hunting when I'm already trying to do so many things to advance my career and job hunt. Nonetheless, this is why, in addition to applying for jobs every day, I make sure that I write, I do business things, and I hang out with my friends and family. At the end of the day, I am the most important person to me, so I need to look after my needs, my mental health, and my emotions, because no one else is going to do it for me. Cope with unemployment by planning activities every day. As a result of my life, my autism, and my business, I have never really had this problem, but a major struggle that the majority of people experience after unemployment is a loss of daily structure. This is why when you're unemployed, it can be important to have daily and weekly plans of rewarding and productive goals that aren't related to work. You might want to read or listen to my podcast episode, What is Behavioral Activation, for more information, because this episode is packed full of great advice and tips to help you do this. For example, you could write out, keep track and tick off what you achieve this day and week. This can be useful because it will give you a clear direction and help you track your progress. So this can help to reduce feelings of hopelessness and thoughts of being useless and not achieving anything. Also, your list could include activities like volunteering, seeing friends, taking a class, or learning new skills. Volunteering and new skills can be particularly useful as they might help you with changing your employment situation. Personally, a very small section of today's to-do list for me includes writing this blog post, proofing it, editing it, uploading it to Patreon so my patrons can get early access, applying for 2 jobs, amongst other things. All these activities help me to feel useful, like I'm achieving things, and it makes me happy. Being positive can be a massive protective factor for your mental health. Cope with unemployment by reducing your shame. When you're unemployed, it's normal to feel shame and disappointed in yourself, and a lot of people are ashamed of what others must think of them because they're unemployed. Some people even try and hide it from their neighbours and their friends. However, it's important to realize that there is nothing immoral or unethical about being unemployed, and if you isolate yourself, then you'll fail to take advantage of the social support that your social network can provide you with, as well as you might find that someone in your social support network knows of a great job for you. For aspiring and qualified psychologists, this is why networking is so important. Your network allows you to talk about job hunting, get some empathy, and you'll find like minded people who are struggling like you. So, this can be validating and give you a sense of community. Yet, your professional network can also give you job recommendations, and they can keep an ear out for jobs in their mental health service for you. Cope with unemployment by reframing how you see unemployment. Our next suggestion is utterly fascinating to me because this is so true, so powerful, and it can be immensely useful. Instead of seeing your period of unemployment as lonely, hopeless, and a time full of concerns, you can think of it as a sabbatical, since because you're unemployed, you now have the time to do things and activities that you couldn't do before. For example, take care of your children, learn new skills, and connect with new people. Also, some people report that after they find a new job that they miss the free time that they used to have. Personally, this is something that I actually love about being unemployed because it gives me tons of time to write, work on business projects, focus on the podcast, and most importantly, interview new and engaging guests. I really struggle to interview people for the Psychology World podcast when I'm working because working uses up energy and it's hard balancing a full-time job, writing and my business without adding the extra task of interviewing. As aspiring and qualified psychologists, we can apply this to ourselves by seeing a period of unemployment as a positive experience. We can use this time to connect with our interests, experience the real world, and to focus on what truly matters to us. I wrote in a Clinical Psychology Reflections Volume 7 that we need to experience the world, interact with others, and learn about how current events impact people. Because our clients don't live in a vacuum, one of the best ways to help our clients is to live, understand what impacts them, and interact with the real world. The added benefit is that unemployment gives us time to learn new skills, learn about new areas of psychology, and read up on the different therapies that we simply haven't had the time for until now. See unemployment as an opportunity, not a disaster, as tough as that can be at times. When it comes to our clients, as aspiring and qualified psychologists, this can actually be a major benefit. Since if they're unemployed, then it can make a behavioral activation a little easier. Our clients will have the time to focus on activities that they enjoy and find pleasurable, as well as they can focus on social activities. They might struggle with the necessary activity part of behavioral activation, but I would focus on the positive aspect of unemployment. A client can custom design their entire week around the 3 types of activities that behavioral activation shows is critical to our mental health. Of course, some clients will struggle to plan an entire week of activities, but it's always about being positive, taking baby steps, and slowly ramping up activity levels over time. Cope with unemployment by give yourself time to find a job. I am definitely guilty of this from time to time. Because after we lose our jobs or enter unemployment, we typically feel a sense of urgency. For example, we have to find a job immediately, or it will be a complete disaster and it will ruin your life. That isn't true. Therefore, it's important that you give yourself time to find a job so you don't make it an emergency, and you should be flexible. As well as if you focus on balancing your job hunt with activities that you enjoy, then it helps to turn off the emergency thinking that's driving your panicked sense of urgency. Personally, even though I gave myself 3 weeks because I was being paid to relax, focus on my writing, business, and other activities that I enjoy, I still panicked after those weeks. I was concerned that I had wasted time, that I hadn't used my time as effectively as I should have, and so on. Yet, looking back, I am really grateful that I gave myself that time to relax, to refocus, and see what I actually wanted to achieve. It was useful, and I know mentally I am in a stronger position because I took time away compared to if I had always panicked from the beginning. Nowadays, I just need to keep reminding myself that it's okay to take time, and as long as I keep taking steps forward, then I will be okay in the end. That's also my unofficial tip for aspiring and qualified psychologists. You might have just finished your doctorate or master's and you're panicking that you need a job, but please relax. Finding a job takes time and your mental health will only decrease if you maintain your sense of urgency. Moreover, when it comes to reflecting on this tip with our clients, it will be difficult, and no one can realize any of these tips for themselves until they're ready. And there are no therapeutic techniques that spring to mind about how to help a client realize this isn't a now problem or something they need to be anxious about. Normally, my mind would jump to a behavioral experiment, but you can't do that in this case. You might be able to have a deep, honest, and open conversation with the client with some psychoeducation about how giving the task of finding a job a sense of urgency is harming their mental health. Then you could work with a client to get them to do thought records so that they can see and reflect on these thoughts and how it makes their body feel. Then, in future sessions, you could work with the client on self soothing techniques so they can relax themselves whenever they have a sense of urgency flooding through them. Just some thoughts. Cope with unemployment by being flexible in your job search. I understand that this next tip is a difficult, but I firmly believe it's important, and it is something I have had to change my thinking on in recent months. People tend to get tethered to what we're used to and where we are, be it in our careers, the industry we work in, or even our neighborhood and our physical location. Therefore, when you're unemployed, it can be useful to think about expanding our search for a new job to include different levels of work, a different industry, compensation, as well as a different location altogether. This might not always be possible, but it can help you find more alternatives so you can change your employment status. Personally, this is something that I am slowly starting to consider more and more. For example, I never would have looked at the civil service before in the United Kingdom because there are no civil service jobs that directly relate to psychology. Equally, 2 days ago, I applied for a dental nurse apprenticeship so I could become a fully qualified dental nurse. It has nothing to do with psychology, but I need a job. And what I found is after you open your mind to other possible career options, there are a lot of fun and interesting jobs out there. As a result, if you finished your undergraduate or postgraduate psychology degree and are struggling to find a psychology job, maybe look at other locations or jobs. Sometimes it seems like there's a lot of psychology jobs in the north of England, but I can't move there because I cannot afford it, and I don't think that would be a good move for me at this moment in the time. You could look at other healthcare jobs or statistics or data science jobs. Psychology really does open a lot more doors to you than you realize. Additionally, when it comes to supporting a client with mental health difficulties after unemployment, I would suggest this tip, and there might be a chance that the client is resistant to this expanding of options. If this happens, I would be very interested in why, and I would want to explore this resistance. It could be because of a mental block, a self limiting belief, or another maladaptive factor that is holding the client back. For me, one maladaptive belief that I have is I could try hard for an apprenticeship, I could do a licensing degree, or I could do a whole host of other options. But my annoyance comes back to I've already done 6 years at university. I already have an undergraduate and a postgraduate degree, and I've already done 6 academic research studies. I've worked really hard. I've had to deal with a lot of mental health difficulties and 3 suicide attempts after my rape. Haven't I given university and my career enough? Haven't I done enough university learning to get ahead in life? And so on. Clearly, I just lack any sort of work experience after working 7 years in education. It isn't right, just, or fair, but I need to keep going, developing my skills and expanding my options. Cope with unemployment by giving yourself credit. Our final tip is possibly the most important because every day is a time for you to balance practicing self care with finding a new job. You could focus on ruminating why you are where you are, but it's healthier, better, and more adaptive for you to focus on validating, accepting, normalizing, as well as taking action daily to help you look for a new job and take care of yourself. You should always give yourself credit because you're trying, you're moving forward, and you haven't given up. You haven't failed. You only fail when you give up. Use this example of self compassion with yourself, your friends, and your clients. Help everyone to realize just how amazing they are. Conclusion. As I continue to look for a new job in this period of unemployment, I am really happy that we looked into the mental health impacts of unemployment and how to manage it. This was fun, insightful, and I certainly learned a lot that I can use with myself and hopefully future clients. Therefore, as a brief recap of how to cope with unemployment, because after I finish this podcast episode, I'll be returning to the job hunt, here's a list of ways to cope. Normalize the fact you're unemployed. Reduce the shame of unemployment. Don't take it personally. Validate your feelings. Practice self care. Plan pleasurable activities every day. Increase your social support. Reach out to your social network. Give yourself time to find a new job. Reframe your unemployment as a sabbatical. Expand your job search. Give yourself credit. I know how tough finding a job can be. It can be soul crushing, depressing, and it can really mess with your mental health, but it will pass. This doesn't represent the rest of your life, and there is support for you out there. So please follow some of the advice in this episode. Keep moving forward, and hopefully you'll find a job sooner or later. I believe in you. Hi everyone, so it's a human and me A again. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got some out of it. Like, I know that I did, because unemployment, let's face it, is never fun. But if we take a proactive approach, if we're positive, if we validate our feelings, take actions every day, and if we problem solve, and if we find a balance between essential, pleasurable, and social activities, then we can cope with unemployment a lot better than otherwise. and we can protect our mental health. And this is something that I'm really learning, and this is why I'm actually feeling okay, and I'm not feeling hopeless. I'm not despairing, and I'm not depressed or really anxious about my future. So it's a great podcast episode, and I'm really hoping that you enjoyed it. So if you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, please check out Suicide Psychology, available in all of the usual places. And if you want to support the podcast on an ongoing basis, then please head on over to patreon.com/the Psychology World Podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, then now you can buymeacoffee.com/Connor Wiley. And I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So please consider reaching out. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwiley.net. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.